Hello my friends, and welcome to this list of classic books, 40 classics that I think everyone should read. And I'm gonna put out a big disclaimer. I do not think these are the best classics. I think these are classics that everyone should read, mostly because of how commonly they come up in contemporary society, whether they're quoted or referenced or phrases have come from there. So I've created this list. Some of these I have read, some of these I want to read. This is a list I would like to complete myself in the next few years. And then I also intentionally only put one book per author on here because I feel like a person could put, let's say, all of Jane Austen's works on a list like this, but I'm just gonna pick one. I feel like once you pick up one book from an author, you generally know if their writing is for you or not, and maybe will be more inspired to pick up more of their works. Some of the books on here I have not enjoyed, but I'm glad I read them for one reason or another. I don't think classics always need to be enjoyed while being read. I think a person can still get stuff out of it, even if you didn't love it. One side question I have before I get into the list is, do you guys have a favorite collection for your classic books? I own my classics in a variety of different editions, and I've come up with a few thoughts. First of all, I think my prettiest ones are these Wordsworth, I think they're Wordsworth collector editions. I have all the Jane Austen except Mansfield Park in this edition, which is on purpose because I really didn't enjoy Mansfield Park. I think these are the most beautiful. They've got the cover with the gold foil. There's always a quote from the book in the back. This one is "We are all fools in love." Definitely the prettiest edition that I have, but it doesn't have like a lot of space for any kind of annotating or anything like that. I feel like the book that has felt the best in my hands while reading it, this is the Barnes & Noble Classics. We don't get these in Canada. I was fortunate enough to have my friend Amy send me this book. I love like how nicely it opened. I didn't feel like I was breaking the spine, even though it's a massive book. Not the prettiest. I wish more classics had just more generic basic spines. So for that reason, I really like the Penguin's Classics books because they kind of got the black spines, but there's multiple different editions, and like the one has the red on the top, this one's got the white over here. I feel like these look the best on the shelf because it's just neutral, they go together, and it just annoys me a little bit that there's different kinds, even though this is Penguin Classics and this is Penguin Classics. Random aside, but I'm curious to know which editions you guys like to collect, if you have like an intentional thought when it comes to that. But now let's get into all 40 books. I did not grab most of my classics off of my bookshelf, but I've got a few here, the ones I've already shared. I think Pride and Prejudice is number one. Everyone needs to read Pride and Prejudice because it is mentioned so much. This is not my favorite of Jane Austen's works. I think maybe it's in the top half, but Mr. Darcy, Elizabeth, they're talked about in so many different ways, different places. One of my favorite movies is You've Got Mail, and she's constantly raving about Pride and Prejudice in there. So I feel like this has to be number one. Also, my whole house is shaking because they are doing some construction. So it's like filming through an earthquake. Okay, there was definitely some debating in my mind which books to include by which authors, but this one was easy because this author only published one book, and that is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. This is a book that I loved when I read it because of the atmosphere, not because of the story. But I felt like I was sitting on the English moors with the wind howling, and I just loved how I felt like I was there. And it is a book that is referenced a lot. One of many on this list that I want to reread, so I feel like it needs to be on here. I have a whole readathon dedicated to this author coming up this next year, and that is Anne of Green Gables by Lucy Maud Montgomery. I feel like this one of hers is the most well-known. Once again, it's not my favorite of hers, but it is the one that is referenced all the time, so I feel like you should read it and then continue the series and then read more books by her. just come join my Year of Maud readathon that I've got going on in 2025. She does such a good job with her beautiful imagery and nature descriptions, and her characters are a lot of fun too. They get into a lot of trouble. Next up is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This, I always say, is one of those books that I did not love when I was reading it. I was so annoyed at our main character, who doesn't have a name but is married to this man whose previous wife was named Rebecca, and it's all about Rebecca and living in her shadow. And then when the book ended, I was like, oh, now I love the book. It's one I think about all the time. I think when I was done reading it, I rated it like 3 or 4 stars, and it's now bumped up to a 5-star book in my mind. Okay, Jane Eyre, She Needs to Be on Here by Charlotte Bronte? Yeah, Charlotte. This is another one that I didn't love when I was reading it. I would like to reread it. I do have some moral issues with some parts of the story, but when I read it last, I listened to the audiobook while I was doing something. I think I listened to it just in one day. And it's a decently large book, so I would like to take more time to go through it and pay more attention to her writing and maybe immerse myself in it a little bit more, but still have issues with the actual storyline. North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. This was one of the few classics that I've read that didn't make me feel like I was reading a classic. Like, I would pick that book up over a contemporary book that I was reading. So that's always a good sign. I've gone on to read more Elizabeth Gaskell, like Wives and Daughters, have more on my TBR, like Ruth and Mary Barton. But North and South, because it didn't feel like I was reading a classic, I feel like it deserves to be on here. And then hopefully you'll spiral into reading more Elizabeth Gaskell. Les Mis. This is one that I want to read. I'm already thinking about my next year's DIY literature degree. I think I'm going to be doing French works translated into English. I want to read Les Mis. We read Jean Valjean in 8th grade, I think, which is just a little portion of a very much abridged kind of story. But I would like to read the full thing because I feel like it's often referenced in contemporary life. Frankenstein. One of the few books that I read in my university English course that I actually enjoyed. And it's short, so there's that. This is a book by Mary Shelley that I have been meaning to reread every year, and I think since next year is my year of rereads, it's going to happen. But I feel like that's a book that has to be read in October, and so when October is over, it's like, oh, I missed my chance. We follow Dr. Frankenstein in this book. Frankenstein is not the monster. The monster does not have a name, but Dr. Frankenstein. It's interesting how modern society has changed, you know, these things, and if people haven't read it, they don't know that Frankenstein is not the creature. Oh, hesitant to put this one on here, but it's short. Animal Farm by George Orwell. I know a lot of people would say 1984, but I really don't like George Orwell's writing, so Animal Farm is shorter, and so I'm putting it on here. Though you could really do either one if you want. I feel like they're both referenced quite a bit in society in different things these days, so but if you are feeling a little overwhelmed, stick with Animal Farm because it's nice and short. Dracula. When I read this 2 years ago, I had no idea that the story was so much longer than I expected. This is by Bram Stoker. What I knew of Dracula was like the first third of the book or so. Like, there was so much more than I was expecting. I don't mean that in necessarily a good or negative way. It did feel a little bit long, but it was interesting. The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. I just read that book last year or earlier this year and was kicking myself for not doing it earlier because it really lives up to the hype. This was written by a 14 or 15-year-old girl back in the 70s, I think, and she just nailed it. Highly recommend reading The Outsiders. Once again, super tiny little book, easy to check off the list. Anna Karenina. I hesitated which book to put on here by Tolstoy, and I think this one's shorter than War and Peace, so that's why it knocked that one out of the running. I've started this book at least twice. Have not read it yet, but I will at some point. read it. The next author is also a bit of, I don't know, can easily be overwhelming. That is Charles Dickens. And there are many Dickens books that I feel like could be on this list, but I decided to put Oliver Twist on here because it is the easiest to read. He is very wordy. He likes to make his works very long, but I feel like Oliver Twist is a quick read. I mean, if you want to go super quick, you could read A Christmas Carol, but Oliver Twist is also referenced a lot in various movies and books, so I would pick that one. Next up is Tess of the Dubervilles by Thomas Hardy, another one that I want to read. He wrote quite a few books, and I know some people have told me other ones are better, but I feel like that's the one I hear about the most, therefore it's the one I want to read. The Count of Monte Cristo, another one that I'm thinking of reading for my French translated books next year. I have watched the movie. I know the general storyline, and it's one that I want to read. Next I have Robinson Crusoe. I grew up watching like the 1970-ish movie, the Swiss Family Robinson one, and it's interesting to me, and then also have read Swiss Family Robinson, how much was taken from Robinson Crusoe. I read this a few years ago when I was running a classics book club. Once again, didn't love the book, but it really helped me catch all the Robinson Crusoe's references in life, which there are quite a few. A nice, easy one that I was flip-flopping on which one to include by this author, but I've chosen The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I really love A Little Princess too, but I think The Secret Garden needs to go on here because there's such great character growth in that one. And she also does a really good job in that book of making you feel like you are in this like remote manor in England, and this garden feels like such a magical place. Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I could not leave this book off of here. Make sure you also are reading like Little Women and Good Wives, the whole story, which is sometimes considered two books and sometimes considered one. Robert Louis Stevenson, I decided to go with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I feel like it's his most well-known one, and once again, it's really short. I think the edition I read it from was about 100 pages, so really easy. I think most people already know the story too, which can help a little bit when you are reading classics to know kind of what's going on. I had to put an Agatha Christie on here for sure, and I debated which one to do. I decided not to do one of her more popular ones in hopes that you will have or you will pick up one of those anyway, and I decided to put on The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. It's another one of my favorites of hers, but it's less known than like The Murder on the Orient Express or And Then There Were None, or any of the ones that they've made movies about. More people need to read that one. Then we have The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. This is actually a quite a short book. I'm blanking on the author, but they did a kind of remake of it a few years ago, and I read that book first and then was like, oh, now I need to like read the original. And it's interesting to see how people can take these classic books and rework them. The Pilgrim's Progress. This is a very different vein than a lot of these books, but this is an allegory that I read in high school and really enjoyed, and it's another one that I would like to reread. This is by John Bunyan, and we follow Christian as he's on his way to the Celestial City. A lot of great nuggets of wisdom in that book. Speaking of You've Got Mail, which I mentioned before, Kathleen Kelly mentions Ballet Shoes and Noel Stretfield and his shoe books. So I'm going to recommend Ballet Shoes as well. I enjoyed that one. Wait, have I read Ballet Shoes? Yes, I always get, because there's Ballet Shoes and Dancing Shoes. I've not read Dancing Shoes. I've read Skating Shoes and Ballet Shoes. But that's the one Kathleen Kelly recommends, so I will recommend Ballet Shoes. The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. I couldn't leave off the last of the Bronte sisters, so we've got Anne Bronte on here. This one is, I think, told in letters. It's been a few years since I read it, and I feel like it has some of the same feel as her sisters' works, as Emily and Charlotte, but this book especially felt much less gothic and those like undertones of eerie creepiness than the other ones. So if you don't necessarily like too many gothic vibes, check that one out. Daddy Longlegs by Jean Webster. This one is told in letters, and it's a quick little read. It's got illustrations of these things that this girl Jerusha sends to this unknown man who has sponsored her from the orphanage to go to college. And her illustrations are hilarious. Her sense of humor is hilarious. She has no idea who this guy is. She calls him Daddy Longlegs because she saw his shadow and he looked really tall. And so it's just her correspondence with him, which is so much fun. Some of you are probably wondering if I'm going to mention Sherlock, and of course I'm going to mention Sherlock. I will mention The Adventures of Sherlock because those are the first short stories, like the first collection of short stories. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle has written quite a few Sherlock books and other books as well, but I would definitely say start with The Adventures of Sherlock. Then I need to throw on The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. This is, I think, C.S. Lewis's most well-known work, and I think for good reason. He has created this magical world for kids that adults still love, and he has such great themes of sacrifice in this story. I love it so much. Oh, another book that I have tried to read multiple times and have not read yet, have not made it through, but I want to, is Uncle Tom's Cabin. I've heard such great things about how the book ends and different things, but I really struggle with how people are treated in that book, to be honest. And I'm supposed to, I know I'm supposed to, but it's been hard. So I will read that one eventually. Then I've got The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. This, I think, is the one I hear about the most. I'm currently attempting to read The Moonstone. It's not going very well. I've stalled. I will probably try to continue at some point. But I've heard really good things about The Woman in White, and that seems to be a more well-known one. The Picture of Dorian Gray, another short little classic, one that I unhauled when we moved because I didn't enjoy it, but I do think that it is an important one to read. So that's the Oscar Wilde I chose for that. One that's on my TBR is Don Quixote. This is a chunker of a book, so I'm not 100% sure when I'm going to read it. I watched some friends of ours, their son was in a high school play of Don Quixote, and then, like, right after that I wanted to read it so bad, and now it's been a year and a half and I still haven't. But I think having watched the play, I'll understand the book so much more. To Kill a Mockingbird, one that I had to read in high school and I think is an important one for people to read, by Harper Lee. And of course I need a Tolkien book on here, so I've got The Hobbit. I know some people would say The Lord of the Rings. I feel like that book or trilogy, however you want to see it, I mean, it is one book, but it's usually marketed as a trilogy. I think it's overwhelming. So I think The Hobbit is a good place to start, and then if you like his writing, continue on and read The Lord of the Rings. Romeo and Juliet. I mean, so much of Shakespeare's plays are incorporated into life these days, into books and into movies. But I do feel like this is the one that everyone has to at least read. And then all the other ones are bonus. The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. This is her story while they were living in hiding during World War II. Did she get the diary when she was 13-ish? And she just kept a record of what they were doing when they were in hiding, and it's hard, especially knowing that she didn't make it. But it's really well done. Gone with the Wind. This one is on my DIY literature degree for this year, another big one. I don't know, I feel like I hear the movie and referenced all the time, or maybe it's even the book. One that I would just like to read, even though I'm a little overwhelmed by the size. I wanted to include an Anthony Trollope on this list. I haven't read any of his books yet, and I think I'm gonna include The Warden. I recently hauled that book, and I heard so many great things when I shared that book haul above the book, so I think that's the one I want to start with. Then we've got The Scarlet Letter. This is a book I actually don't know anything about, but I hear about it, and my son really likes the Dogman books, and the Dogman book titles are based off of classic books, some of which are included on this list, I think, and some of which aren't. But there's like The Scarlet Shredder is one of the Dogman books, and every time I see that one of his lying around, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to read that book. 2 more left. We've got East of Eden. I have not read any John Steinbeck yet, but this is also on my DIY literature degree. It's on that shelf over there. Hopefully in the next year or at some point in my life, I will get to it. And the last one is one that I have read and am continuing to read, and I feel like it needs to be on this list. That is the Bible. I don't often share my Bible reading on this channel because I often don't really think of it so much as a book. But I really did want to include it because I feel like it is something that everyone should read, especially if you are a follower of Christ. If you have not read it in its entirety, don't feel any shame in that, but I think also try to do it. I didn't read it through until I think it was after I was 30. And then, despite having many times trying to start the Bible in a year plan, you know, making it through January, falling off in February or March, or whenever Leviticus hit, all of a sudden in October one year, I decided, you know, I'm gonna read the Bible in 90 days. Like, what made me think that I was gonna do it in 90 days when I couldn't even do it in 365 days? I don't know, but you know what? I totally did it. It was less than 90 days. And since then, I've read it through multiple times. And you definitely get a different reading experience when you read it quickly. I've been able to make connections much easier than when I'm reading it out over a long period of time. You can see the overarching story and what God is doing through the Bible, through that time period, better that way. Not saying you have to read it in 90 days or anything. Take a year, take 2 years, take whatever you need, but definitely work your way through it. So this list could have been longer. There could have been more books I added, maybe some books that shouldn't have been on here, but this is the list I came up with, and my plan is to read all of the books on here that I have not read in the next few years. I would really like to prioritize a lot of these books in my reading coming up, which works well for my plan to read more slowly and deeply in 2025, and so I think I'll be spending more time reading some of these chunky books that intimidate me. I would be curious to hear, what books do you guys think should be included on this list? Is there an author that I included a book from and you think I should have included a different one? Do you have a classics list that you guys are trying to work towards checking off? I would love to hear it. Let me know. And make sure you tell me what edition of classics are you guys collecting? Which ones are the best? I want to hear your thoughts here. Thanks for hanging out with me again.